This story from John 4 is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. And that's true because it gives us such a clear picture of who Jesus is and what he offers us. To understand this story, we first need to realize that at the time Jesus lived, Jews looked down on Samaritans. Samaritans were the descendants of Jews who had married Gentiles. So they were seen as half-breeds, deserters of the true faith. And devout Jews wanted nothing to do with them. We also need to realize that men looked down on women. A rabbi at the time said, "Prolong not conversation with a woman." That is to say, even with one's wife, how much more with a neighbor's wife? Hence, the wise men say, "He who prolongs conversation with a woman brings evil upon himself." I won't even touch that. In Jesus' day, a husband would rarely speak to his wife in public. A single man would never speak to a single woman in public. A Jewish man would never speak to a Samaritan woman in public. And yet that is precisely what Jesus does. Jesus arrives at Jacob's well in Samaria at noon, scorching heat bearing down on him. And he asks a Samaritan woman for a drink of water. She's shocked. She knows the cultural norms. She knows that Jews don't associate with Samaritans. And so she says to him, "What are you doing asking me for a drink?" Jesus says to her, "If you knew who was asking you for this drink, you would ask him, and he would give you living water." Now, this woman doesn't really get what Jesus is saying. She thinks he's probably talking about running water from a stream or a river, and she's not sure how Jesus could be able to tap into that kind of water. And then Jesus tells her, "Everyone who drinks this water, the water from Jacob's well, will be thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never thirst. In fact, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." This woman still isn't fully tracking what Jesus is saying, but she's heard enough to know that she wants what he's offering. So she says to him, "Give me this water so that I won't get thirsty." Jesus says to her, "Go call your husband and come back." She says to him, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus says, "Yes, that's true. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're now living with isn't your husband." Wow. Now, for us today, we might hear that and say, "Hey, no big deal. Elizabeth Taylor had 7 husbands." But in that day, to have been married 5 times and to be living with someone you're not married to, in that day, that's not cool. That's loose living. That's someone with serious emotional and relational baggage. Now we see why this woman came to the well at noon. In a hot place like the Middle East, women who are coming to a well to draw water would do so early in the morning or late in the afternoon. They wouldn't do so at noon in the midst of the hottest time of the day. The only reason someone would come to the well at noon is to avoid the other women of the town. That's what this woman is doing. This is a woman with a secret, a woman with a checkered past, a woman who's thirsty. I once met this woman on an airplane flying from Los Angeles to New Jersey. We sat down right next to each other, and as we struck up a conversation, realized that we had gone to the same college, to Occidental College in Los Angeles. And this woman had grown up in New Jersey. In high school, she had a 3.9 GPA. She was a Woman Athlete of the Year, the daughter of the high school jock and cheerleader. Folks would look at her family and say, "Oh, you've got the perfect family." She was bright, attractive, cool, personable. Someone you would look at and say, she's really got her act together. Not someone you would look at and say, she's really thirsty, thirsty for acceptance, thirsty for love. But as we began our conversation and we talked, she shared with me that during her freshman year of high school, she had been in 3 different hospitals for an eating disorder. She had literally starved herself to the point that she couldn't move. And it turns out her mom had the exact same issue, but had never fully dealt with it. And her dad was an alcoholic who'd been physically abusive to her mom. And as we talked, several times she said to me, I don't want to end up like my mom. I don't want to end up in the same life. I don't want to end up in the same trap. As we talked, she shared with me that she had found something that she could believe in, and that was acupressure. She said, it's effective, it works. And I could tell as she spoke about acupressure and that whole side of industry and this line of work she wanted to do, that this was something real for her, something she could believe in, something that had met her needs in a way. Eventually, as we continued this flight from LA to New Jersey, I asked her, so why are you flying to New Jersey? She says to me, I had to get out of town. Just too much heat. She said, I've been living with a guy. He's not working. I'm paying all the bills. The relationship is a total mess. Then her voice gets softer and she says, I'm addicted to speed. I don't want to tell you how much money I waste on it. I can't function without it. Turns out, one of the reasons she started taking speed is because it decreased her appetite. She said to me, I think I can stop. I have friends that will be supportive. I asked her by what power. She said, I can do it. As we continued to talk, at one point I said to her, you would dig Jesus. You are a seeker. You want something that works, that satisfies. You should give Jesus a try. No one can love you like Jesus. I pulled out my Bible. And I turned to John 4, and I read her the story from John 4. And we talked about it. And she told me, I'm more into Eastern religions. And she had a sacred text with her. And she pulled out her sacred text and read it to me, and we talked about that. And as we got closer to New Jersey, I could tell she was getting more nervous. And she said, I'm just really nervous to see my dad. She was moving back in with her parents. And as we landed, I said to her, thanks for sharing. I'll be praying for you. She said to me, thanks. Remember your pressure points. And, I saw her as I saw her meet her dad. And I saw the two of them walk off together. And I got to say, I can still kind of picture that. I just felt this intense sense of sadness. I just thought, here is this woman who is so thirsty for peace in her life, thirsty for acceptance, thirsty for love, just like the woman that Jesus met at the well, thirsty. Just as our body gets thirsty, so does our soul. God made us for soul satisfaction. So we have this soul thirst in us that longs to be quenched. And we try to satisfy our soul thirst in all kinds of ways. In relationships, romantic relationships, and sex. We try to quench that soul thirst in work. Some people do that. Maybe in alcohol or drugs, the woman I met on the plane. Maybe through money and the possessions that money can buy. That will somehow satisfy my soul. Or through success. I think we start that at such a young age. I look at my first grader, star tests and charts, and I was good today, and I was awesome today, and somehow if I succeed, my soul will be satisfied. Even through food. Frederick Buechner writes, a glutton is one who raids the fridge for a cure for spiritual malnutrition. It's a good quote, right? A glutton is one who raids the fridge for a cure for spiritual malnutrition. There are lots of things we raid for a cure for spiritual malnutrition. There are a number of different things we can turn to in order to try to quench our soul thirst. But these things don't satisfy. Like the water in Jacob's well, they leave us wanting more. They still leave our soul thirsty. In Jeremiah 2, verses 12 through 13, we find these words. Jeremiah 2, 12 through 13. Be appalled at this, you heavens, and shudder with great horror, declares the Lord. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. So a cistern is a tank for catching and storing rainwater. So God's saying, I have this spring of living water to give you, refreshing, overflowing water, but you've walked away from me. And instead of drinking this water I have for you, you've decided to dig your own cisterns. But they're broken and they don't hold any water. And God is just saying, what are you doing? I imagine if we had water delivered to our house. 5-gallon jugs of bottled water, spring water, and our kitchen just had stacks of it. Spring water all over the place. But our sons came up to us and said, Mom, Dad, we want to get our own water from here on out. And so they decided to just start collecting their own water. And so they would go out with those red plastic cups to get rainwater, but every cup they hold was cracked and broken. See, when it comes to satisfying our thirsty souls, the problem isn't that we want too much. The problem is that we want too little. The problem is that we settle for second best. The problem is that we settle for stagnant well water when we could have Jesus' living water. So Jesus says to each of us, come to me, and I will quench your thirsty souls. In fact, in chapter 6 of John's Gospel, which we're going to be reading this week, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus says, I'm it. I'm the one. I'm the one who can satisfy your soul hunger and quench your soul thirst. I'm it. Now, my guess is that some of us hear this promise and think, well, that's too good to be true. I'm sure there are plenty of Christians out there who are still hungry and still thirsty. I think that's true. And I think that's why it's important to understand that Jesus is talking about a daily choice and not a one-time decision. See, in the Greek, when Jesus says, whoever comes to me will never go hungry, whoever believes in me will never be thirsty, the verbs come and believe are in the present tense. And the present tense denotes continuous action or ongoing action in progress. So Jesus, in essence, is saying, whoever is coming to me will never be hungry. And whoever is believing in me will never be thirsty. In other words, as you choose into this each day and each moment of each day, your soul will be satisfied. See, I know just even for me personally, I'm well aware that I look to other things besides Jesus to try to quench my soul thirst. That's an ongoing struggle for me. But when I am looking to Jesus, when I am coming to Him, carving out a satisfying and joyful life with Him, then the deepest thirsts of my soul are quenched. Jesus offers us living water. And I think one of the things we really need to understand is that if we want to receive the living water Jesus offers, we need to give up the stagnant water we've been drinking. If we want God's spring of living water, we need to walk away from our broken cisterns. We've got to give up one in order to receive the other. We've got to give up our old life with its old patterns in order to receive Jesus' new life. That's why Jesus asked the woman to go and get her husband, not to shame her, but to show her the choice she must make. To help her see, oh, here's what I've been drinking instead of Jesus' living water. Up to this point, she has turned to relationships with men to quench her soul thirst. And Jesus is saying, if you want to receive the new life I'm offering, you need to walk away from that old life. Stop looking to relationships with men to quench your thirst. Instead, come to me, believe in me. Coming to Jesus requires taking an honest look at your life. Honestly looking at what you're doing and why. Some of us are so busy that we never stop to ask, what am I turning to try to quench my soul thirst? Some of us are on autopilot to such an extent that we never stop to ask, am I thirsty? Aisha is an Occidental alum who graduated several years after me. And during her junior year at Occidental, she decided to participate in a program called Faces in the Crowd. And this program is the pinnacle event of freshman orientation at Occidental. It's designed to help all the freshmen get an introduction to the school. And everyone who participates in this Faces in the Crowd program spends a semester together, and during this semester, they each develop a monologue that they perform that night for all the freshmen. So Aisha decided to be in this, and for her monologue, she chose the theme of thirst. And during the event, with the freshman class in front of her, she shared how she came to Occidental with a really clear plan. Clear-cut plan that involved going to Occidental, then grad school, PhD, got it all figured out. But a couple years into the plan, she realized, I'm doing a lot of this to quench my thirst. I'm trying to quench my thirst through the praise of others, particularly professors, and through education itself, and she realized it's left me thirsty. And then she retold the story of John 4, but in modern ways. And she shared, she said, I have an uncle who owns a store in Mississippi. And I would work at that store over summers. And one day I was working in that store, and a man came in and he asked for a bottle of water. So I got him one. And the weird thing was, I'd never met this man before, but he knew me. And that kind of confused me, but it also raised my curiosity. And he began speaking about living water, which really intrigued me. So at one point I asked him, how do you get this living water? And he said, ask. So I asked. Then Aisha ended her monologue this way. I found a joy. The source of my joy is Jesus. And when I come to him, he quenches my thirst. Dead silence. Occidental is not a particularly religious school. Dead silence. Afterwards, not a lot of people spoke to her. There were a few people that came up, thanked her for sharing honestly from her heart. Here's what I think is most interesting. A mother of one of the incoming freshmen was at the event. And afterwards, this mom wrote a note to Aisha and slid this note under her dorm room door. And in the note she wrote, you must have been talking to me because I have been thirsty. I've never been religious, but I've found myself talking to God lately. And you named what it is that I've been missing. I want to pursue the joy you spoke about. Are you thirsty? Do you want to receive Jesus' living water? Do you want to receive Jesus' new life? If so, come to Jesus and ask for it. Come just as you are. Come and see. Come receive. Come and live forever. Life everlasting. Strength for today. Taste the living water and never thirst again. Come just as you are. Right here, right now, you can come to Jesus and receive his new life.